Hey guys, this is a quick update on my winter setup, which was the subject of a video I uploaded a couple of weeks ago. In today's video, I will show you some changes I've made to my setup in the past 3 weeks and explain to you why I did them. First off, you may remember from that last video that my table, as well as this metal frame, were too short for my T5 tubes. What I mean by that is that the closest and furthest tubes had to overlap in the center. And because of that, the lights were not properly aligned. The obvious solution would have been to replace the 4-foot tubes at the back by some 2-foot tubes. But I don't have any 2-foot tubes, and I would prefer to reuse stuff I already have, such as some of these 4-foot tubes. So I came up with the idea of positioning one of the 4-foot lights in the other direction, perpendicular to the window, as well as extending the grow area away from the window. Let me show you how this all works. Here you have a pair of 4-foot tubes lighting these 3 trays. These trays have a combined length of 4 feet, exactly the same length as the tubes, so we're good. And over there at the back of the room I have another 4-foot tubes positioned sideways, lighting this tray as well as half of this other tray. Why only half of this tray? Because I've only put seeds on half of it, the half that's under the light. The other half does not have any seeds, so I leave it abandoned. The T5 tubes, as you can see, is left overhanging without any support, but most of the weight is on the other half, so it won't tip over unless you push down on it. Now I only have 3 tubes instead of 4 from the previous videos, and none of the lights coming from the tubes is wasted. The same goes for the heating mats. I have 3 of them here on this setup, and they're basically positioned just underneath each tube. Bear in mind the heating mats I use are exactly the same length as the tubes, 4 feet. So I have 2 mats here next to each other, running parallel to the window, and a third mat over there perpendicular to the others. I had to make an extension on the side of the table, and for that I reused an old metal shelf with various spacers to bring it up to the level of the table. Of course, I added more insulation foam so that the heat from the heating mat does not get wasted. The problem at the moment is that this room is not heated, and the temperature here is pretty low. When the trays are still covered with transparent film, you are okay temperature-wise, because the heat tends to build up inside. However, if you are growing older seedlings that are not covered anymore by transparent film, then the soil tends to be somewhat cooler, because the ambient air in the room is so cold. The air in the room is actually warmer than in my garage, because there are heating mats and fluorescent lights that contribute to heat up the room, but only ever so slightly. You may remember from the last video that in this room I also had some older seedlings that were not covered anymore. They used to be here. As you can see now, they're gone. I have moved them upstairs and I will show them to you in a minute. I had to move them upstairs because they needed a bit more light than they can get in this room here. And most importantly because it's just too cold in here. These younger seedlings here are fine, because the temperature inside the tray is actually quite warm. I can feel it with my hand. With younger seedlings that are still enclosed, the temperature should stay below 30 degrees Celsius or 86 degrees Fahrenheit. On the other hand, for older seedlings that are not enclosed anymore, the temperature should be over 30 degrees Celsius or 86 Fahrenheit. And this is how I have them set up upstairs. Let me show you. Here we are upstairs in front of a sunny window, and you can see where the seedlings are growing now. They are inside the tent. It's a cheap little greenhouse that sells for 20 euros. That's about 20 US dollars. It doesn't have a floor, which means I can just lift it to reach for the trays. There are also 2 windows to access the plants. But when I need to water them, it's just easier to lift the entire greenhouse. The reason I use the greenhouse is that it builds up the temperature when the sun heats it, which is all morning long, until about 1 p.m. It also prevents the heat generated by the light and the heating mat from escaping. In the other room downstairs, the sun would not come in at all of the whole day. And now that we are entering the colder month, these plants were just too cold to grow. Now with this setup here, we have the heat from the sun, plus the heat from the fluorescent light, plus the heat from the heating mat, not to mention that the greenhouse is located in my living room, which itself is heated. So these plants now think it's growing season, with temperatures in there well above 30 degrees Celsius or 86 degrees Fahrenheit. But for the plants to think it's growing season, you also need longer days. And this is where the fluorescent lighting comes handy. I have it on in the morning and evening when it's dark outside so that the plants think they're in summer. The lights and heating mats are on from about 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. But I unplug the lights and mats when the sun hits the greenhouse. I don't use a timer, but you could if you wanted to. The whole thing is raised. I use some wire racks for spacing. I did that to further isolate the heating mats and isolation foam from the cold tiled floor. But most importantly, so that the sun reaches the plants for the maximum amount of time. If I had the plants set up at floor level, then they would be in the shade some of the time because of this step behind them. These are two T5 tubes, but only one of them is plugged in, the one that's close to me. One is enough, and it is only on when the sun does not hit the plants. Of course, when the sun is on the plants, you absolutely don't need any extra light. If anything, the sun could be too much light. But in the case of these older plants, these are 6 months old, they can handle half a day of winter sun without me having to protect them with shading cloth. If they were freshly bought seedlings, then you might have to use a rag to filter the sun. It's very simple. You look at the plants, and if they're going red, it's too much sun. Like I said, the plants here are older than the ones that are downstairs, which are about 6 weeks old. But you could also start seeds with a greenhouse setup like this one, no problem. Is there any downside from using a greenhouse? Yes, humidity. It tends to build up inside the greenhouse, so I open one of these windows 2 or 3 times a day to change the air and to reduce the humidity inside. When the trays are not enclosed in transparent film anymore, then the plants have already got used to a drier climate, and it's best not to expose them to crazy amounts of humidity. Of course, if you are using a tent like this for trays that are still covered in transparent film, then humidity won't be an issue anyway. And in any case, humidity does not seem to hurt the plants as long as you change the air a couple of times a day. For night time, I open both of these windows as it will clear out the humidity and also allow the inside to cool down a bit for the night. As you know, cacti grow better when there is a contrast in temperature between daytime and nighttime. This idea of getting the cacti to continue to grow during the winter, I only do for plants that are less than a year old. These, for instance, are about 6 months old. I started them on the 1st of June. I could possibly leave them outside for the winter. Remember, we have mild winters here in Barcelona, but I'd rather get them to grow some more for a few months to give them more size and strength. When the plants are bigger, like 2 or 3 inches tall, which is about a year old, then I treat them like adult San Pedros. On a side note, I actually like how this greenhouse looks in my living room. It looks especially cool at night, and I like to look at them. Well, anyway, I hope you enjoyed this little update. If you did, smash the like and don't forget to subscribe and tick the little bell. I take it for granted you've already watched my winter setup video. If not, check it out as it is full of tips and information. All for now, and I'll see you guys and girls again very soon.